All right, guys, I thought I'd talk about this. Millennials are the worst tippers out of all generations. Typically, we're taught that you should tip your waitress or waiter and you should tip them a fair amount, usually 15% or higher, depending on wherever you are and what kind of food service you're being given. But millennials are really bad tippers. This article's from the New York Post, though it's all over the place. Very interesting. I like the article. It says, hot tip for millennials. Tip your wait staff. Millennials are cheapskates compared to other generations, the new creditcards.com report suggests. 1 in 10 say they usually don't leave any tip for restaurant servers versus 3% of people from older generations, and nearly 1 in 5 millennials tend not to leave any money in transactions involving pre-inputted tip amounts. In cabs, ride-hailing services, coffee shops, food trucks, compared with 12% of older folks. Wow. It's actually very interesting. Me personally, since I'm kind of in that generation, I'm sure people are wondering how much do I tip? It honestly depends on the type of service I'm given. Usually the fair rule is 15%. So I go on the calculator on my phone, I see my bill, and 15%. Though usually when I go out to eat, I'm with a group, or if I go out with my family members, they usually take care of that. But if I'm in a group of friends, we usually pool the tip. So it really doesn't, giving an extra like $2 or $3, it doesn't really hurt me because, like I said, usually I'm in a big group when I go out to eat and we all just chip in a few dollars and there you go. But apparently 1 in 10 millennials do not tip at all. And I don't know what to think about that. That's just crazy. Now this article's been spreading all over the place. I'm sure when a young person walks into a restaurant, the waiter's going to be nervous that they're not going to even get a tip money. Wow. In some ways, it's not surprising at all because of the well-documented financial struggles. So they're talking about how millennials are in a lot of student debt and they don't have a lot of money. So when they go out to eat, they just decide, I can't really afford to spend more money, so I'm just going to not tip. Because I guess they view tipping as optional. Like, it's a great thing to do, but at the same time, it's not really an obligation or something that's required. I mean, of course, you have those restaurants where tipping is automatically included in your bill, no matter what. Now, I personally don't agree with that one, because what if you have a shitty server that has an attitude or doesn't get anything right? They're automatically entitled to 15 or 20%, and that's not fair. And then, what's another alternative to tipping? Just paying them an actual salary, but at the same time, your restaurant bill would be even more expensive, and that will probably have less people going to restaurants because, I mean, there already is a problem with less and less people going to restaurants than before. So that wouldn't be good either. So I think it's a lose-lose situation no matter what. You could force people to tip, which I guess some people view as the best solution, but at the same time, you should earn a tip, not be given a tip. You know what I mean? But I generally believe though that the way that the food service industry works is kind of messed up because most industries, you get a wage and you get a salary and that's that. But for some reason in the food service industry, the rule books are just scrapped. And these people, I think their actual salary is like what, $2 an hour, and then everything else they have to make up on tips. And I do understand the argument from both sides. I really do. And millennials are lagging behind older generations. And it says, if somebody ends up cursing you out or spilling soup all over you, it's one thing if you don't tip. But beyond that, you need to tip because those folks' livelihoods depend on it. Now, that's always the argument people use when it comes to tipping. And I definitely agree with it. But it's at the same time, it's like, you guys ever seen the movie Reservoir Dogs by Tarantino? One of the most famous scenes in that movie was they're at a restaurant and the guy refuses to tip because he doesn't believe in it. He doesn't think that the responsibility of paying someone's salary should be on them. It should be on the person that employs them. And I understand that. I don't think there's a right or wrong side, to be honest with you. But I think generally the morally correct thing that people agree on is to tip your waitress or waiter. I mean, that's the general thing to do. But there definitely is room for debate. And I think debating is not a bad thing about how we should treat food servers, how they should be compensated, whether or not it should be changed or even slightly altered than the current system where it's just like, oh yeah, we're going to pay you nothing. And we're going to rely on the customers to pay your salary for us, even though they already pay for food. It's like, it's definitely seems backwards to me because literally I understand not every other industry is the same as the food serving industry. It's definitely completely different. But at the same time, it brings up a lot of questions like, why is it like that? I understand owning and operating a restaurant is very expensive. I understand that a lot of these restaurants, especially the ones in the city, have very high cost of operations to begin with. Most restaurants that are like in Manhattan or even Brooklyn, the lease is probably like $50,000 a month. Sometimes it's even more than that. So they have to make at least thousands and thousands of dollars in profit a day. And then if they have to pay their workers a high salary, then food's going to be even more expensive. And there's no easy solution to this. The current system is definitely not good, but I think the question is if the other solutions are better. And one of the other solutions has already been put into practice where the tip is automatically included into your bill. But is that really any different from just not having a tip at all? You know what I mean? It's really the same principle. You're not having a tip, but paying your servers more is really not much different from having tips, quote unquote, but it being included in your bill without you having any say-so in that. So I'm not sure what to think about this, to be honest with you. Other below average tippers included men, Southerners, people from the Western U.S., parents with young kids, less educated people, and low earners, according to the survey. Quite a few of those might simply get down to a question of income, where these folks have less financial margin of error in their day-to-day lives and thus can't afford to be as generous, or as they themselves might like to be. Yeah, I think it has to do with people just can't afford it. And then people say, well, if you can't afford it, then don't go out to eat. That's always an argument that I see. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's still an optional thing to do, isn't it? Like, it's the moral thing to do. But at the same time, you have the freedom not to pay a tip. So when people say, don't go out and eat if you can't tip, if you can't afford it, it's just, I don't know. I kind of feel like that's kind of stupid because you're shifting the blame onto the wrong people. You're shifting the blame onto the customer. Meanwhile, in every other industry, or even in other aspects of the food industry, you go to McDonald's, they work their ass off in that kitchen. And they work their ass off serving their food to you, believe it or not. Being a fast food worker is a tough job. But we don't live in a culture that's obligated to tip these people. Are we? So a lot of questions should definitely be asked. And then there's also the question of how much you should tip. 42% overall said they tended to tip 20%. The days of 15% being the standard tip amount are in the past. That's another thing about tipping, okay, that I'm going to kind of go on a rant about. People who don't tip at all, that's a conversation. But then people who do tip, if you tip like 10% or 15%, now you're stingy and you're greedy and you're not paying enough. Like, I saw posts on Twitter or Facebook, with all these college girls that are serving, waiting tables, and someone leaves them a check. Someone leaves them a tip on the check for 10% or maybe like little something like that. Like nothing like too incredibly cheap, but like also I guess not enough to some sort. Like be grateful, honestly. Be grateful that you're getting a tip because you have it where 10% of people do not tip at all. So be grateful that you're even getting a tip. And if you don't like the way you're being compensated, don't work in that industry where you get $2 an hour and you rely on people's goodwill for your salary to be paid. Good luck with that. That's all I have to say. Like, you can't... I just think people are being a little bit too demanding on that front. You have to tip at least 20%. And if you tip any less, then you're stingy. I just don't agree with that. At all. %23% go for 15%, 17% gave less than that, and 6% said they left no tip. Yeah, people saying that 20% should be the standard and not 15%. It's still very interesting. So they say 15 to 20% for a sit-down wait service and 10% pre-tax for wait service and a buffet. You should offer 10% for a large complicated order for extra service. Go with 15% or $2 to $5 for pizza. I mean, whatever. People are all, like, just to close my thoughts here. You can post all these articles you want about people should tip this amount, people should tip that amount, people should tip at all. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do. And there's really not much you can do to stop it. So, I really don't see the point in spending too much time about this. Wait, what was this? So that's weird. 84% of them donate to charity, but 10% of them don't tip. Well, I guess that makes sense because the majority of people do tip and the majority of people do like to donate to stuff. So that's not too bad. But yeah, those are my overall thoughts about tipping and millennials not tipping enough, it seems. What do you guys think about tipping at restaurants? Let me know in the comments down below.